All right, welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today we're doing something special. We are at the Old State Saloon, and joining me for this live episode, first live episode I've ever done, is my buddy Congressman Madison Cawthorn.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Bryce. Thank you very much for having me. We're right here in Eagle, Idaho, and we're again like at the Old State Saloon. This place is phenomenal. But the Bryce Eddy Show, if you're not familiar with Bryce Eddy at this point in your life, you need to do it. He's one of the most well-informed people I've ever met in my life, and a true patriot, a true person who wants to change the culture of America.
But that only means I know a little bit about everything. But don't test me. Hey, so a couple of things I wanted to do on this episode. You know, we had styled this one when we were talking about permanent Washington. We were going to talk a little bit about masculinity and some of those sort of things. But it's really interesting because I want to open up and talk about what's happening in Ohio. Um, because it's not about the cats. Now, for those of you that have not been paying attention, there were some stories that went around of the area being flooded by migrants that have been essentially intentionally dropped on this town. Of 50,000 people, they've had 20,000 Haitian immigrants brought in and brought in actually illegally. Okay, our government, under the guise of asylum and some of these sort of things, has circumvented our actual immigration laws and, against the will of the residents, imported people into this town. It represents, I think it's something now like 30% of this small town is now these Haitian immigrants. Now, if you're watching this unfold, it's become a very divisive political issue. On one side, you have residents, people, American citizens that do not like the idea of open borders, because that's what we have in this country right now, and it's a intentional Marxist push to destabilize, to change this country, and not for the better. On the other side, there are the proponents of what really is a push towards a new kind of communism that are calling the people who are upset and angry about this xenophobes and racists. And they're making it about the color of the Haitian skin, and under the guise of woke pastors talking about love thy neighbor and welcome the stranger and things like that, they are trying intentionally to destabilize us. So I wanted to hit that topic with Madison a little bit, talk about the border, talk about some of those things that they're doing to us intentionally.
Well, number one, just to touch on what's going on in Ohio. Obviously, this has really clearly motivated my dog Beowulf to start going door knocking, door to door, make sure we elect Donald Trump so we can close the border. But this is a larger picture of what always happens with the mainstream media and with the radical left. So, in the very beginning, when this news first started breaking, they said, no, that isn't happening. Haitian immigrants are not eating your pets. And they act like it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. And then you wait about 2 weeks and say, well, it's kind of happening, but not really. And then they say it's a right-wing conspiracy. Then they say, well, it is happening, but it's not that big of a deal. We are currently now about 2 to 3 weeks away from someone in the Washington Post writing a op-ed piece saying, well, yes, they are eating your pets, and here's why it's a good thing. This is the story that they do every single time. And again, like Bryce said, they're trying to make this about the color of the Haitian skin, but this has nothing to do with the color of someone's skin. I mean, I don't really judge anyone by their skin color. That wanting to judge people by their skin color or to look at them through the lens of their skin is just classic critical race theory. And that's not who we are as Americans. I judge everybody by the quality of who they are as a person. But when you start importing the third world, you will become the third world. What is going on here is in many parts of Haiti, voodoo is a very big thing. And I know to some people when we're saying that the voodoo is a really big thing, it sounds like we're just making a random talking point. But in no joking manner, voodoo is one of the largest religions in all of Haiti. And animal sacrifice is one of the main proponents for rituals, for all these things they do there. And yes, they do eat your pets. Now, people continue to deny.
They drink the blood first, though.
They drink the blood. I mean, it's some creepy stuff. It really is. Haiti And I have met I've met some incredible Haitians in my life, but Haiti itself is a dark spot and a foothold of evil for the devil to be able to launch just what we would call just a stronghold for spiritual warfare. And we have to be able to look at this through the lens of spiritual warfare. When we start importing people into our country who have a completely different cultural identity than we do, and then we start to make them 30% of the entire population of a town, do you not think that's going to destabilize things? These people have no idea what it means to be an American.
Well,
just because you cross the border does not instantly turn you into someone who loves freedom and respects your neighbor.
Yeah, well, and they're doing it at the expense, using our taxpayer money at the expense of American poor and minorities that are already there. So, as they're telling us that we're xenophobes and you're racist if you're calling some of these things out, there's videos of actual, black minorities saying, "Here's what's happening," and they're taking the ducks out of our parks, and all of that sort of thing that's happening. So I want though to expand this topic and kind of talk about it from a high level, because in the 1960s under Teddy Kennedy, they altered the idea of immigration here in this country. So immigration at its core is to strengthen a nation, right? And the idea of sovereignty, the idea of borders is a biblical concept. God tells us, go forth and make disciples of all the nations. We were, remember the story of the Tower of Babel. What was that about? That was about centralization of power against God's will. That was about globalism. And that's really the kind of core of the battle that we're fighting today. When I talk about, they, like who is they? And people ask, okay, who is our enemy? Well, obviously we're under a spiritual battle, right? So, we know who that enemy is. But at the end of the day, we are fighting against people who would like to centralize all authority underneath them, globalize our governance, and truly make us into slaves. They use communism and they use Marxist techniques as the sales pitch to get it done. But what we're facing is a global feudalism 2.0, where they're the masters and we're the serfs. When Ted Kennedy altered the idea of immigration here, it became, instead of about the country, it became about the immigrant. And they stopped having stringent requirements of sharing our values, okay? You can be an American and be whatever color, whatever cultural background, whatever race, creed, even religion that you want, but you must share the core American values of liberty, which is God's idea, not man's idea. And that's the struggle that we're having right now is, yes, we're to welcome the stranger, but there are standards, legal, moral, and otherwise, that we are able to, as a nation, hold people to. And that is the kind of the center of the battle that we're facing.
That's absolutely correct. And, obviously, prior to what you're talking about with Teddy Kennedy, immigration could be a good thing for the country. If you have something to add value to our nation, if you can come here, share our values, bring some expertise that we need into this nation, then I'm all for it. I believe in America as the predominant superpower on the planet, and I want the best people for that. Whether they're from this country or not, I want the best people on the planet here as long as they share our values. But they've obviously changed that now, and the reason I believe they've done this is because over the last 40 years, because we've had just a nominal opposition party called what we call the Republican Party, which thank God it's changing thanks to President Donald Trump. The majority of the time for the last 40 years, they have just said, well, maybe they'll start liking me if I just bend the knee on this one issue and back up half an inch. Or maybe they'll stop writing mean things about me in the New York Times if I bend the knee on this one issue and back up, 50 feet. And then by the time I'm born in 1995 and then now turned into a grown adult in the United States of America here in the 2020s, you start looking at what's going on in our country and you realize that bending the knee little bit by little bit, backing up over and over and over again, has turned us into a welfare state. And now they have us as a welfare state. They all of a sudden can just open the gates to the city as wide as they possibly can. They can bring everybody they want into this country, which is financially impossible for us to continue to uphold. And then you're going to see AOC, you're going to see the Squad, you're going to see all these people who want Marxism anyways. Once the dollar's no more, once our financial system has collapsed because it was not intended to take on 50 million extra people every single year, they can then stand on the top of these marble steps and point and say, look, we told you that capitalism would fail. And then they can usher in hardcore communism. And that is their main intention behind this, because it is all about the consolidation of power for the very, very, very few in the elite.
Yeah, and complicit in this, and actually to add a little bit of a exclamation point on your comment about cultures and bringing things here, the wonderful part about the American experiment is that there are some amazing things about other cultures that are not ours, right? Mm-hmm. And we have this competitive landscape to where cultures will bring the best of their stuff here, which is what used to happen. I mean, it's how we got tacos. I mean, you bring something that wins in the marketplace, right? And every culture God has blessed uniquely with having wonderful things that they can bring us and that can be celebrated within our American system. We have the right, and we should openly talk about how we believe that American culture is a superior culture. Now, saying that is super controversial, and I got accused, like he does and everybody does who's conservative, of being a racist, white supremacist, all of the other stuff. They just go down this list, which, by the way, neuters every single one of these terms. And there's never been a better place for actual racists to hide, because, they call everybody a racist. I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's stupid. But I got called a white supremacist, and of course I'm not, but I am a Western supremacist.
Absolutely.
I do believe that Western culture, which is a mix between Christianity at its core and what the Greek philosophers taught us, right? And it is a beautiful mix that has informed our country and has created the most prosperous nation that has lifted more people out of poverty worldwide than any other form of government, any other culture ever, period, full stop. And so we should not be ashamed of that, and we should not let them and the harpies and their effeminate male familiars tell us that we should shut up about this stuff, because it is the truth.
And, talking about cultures, a lot in the intelligentsia will say, and there's a wonderful book written, it's called Germs, Guns, and Steel. I disagree with the premise of it in totality, because what it says is the reason that Western culture has done so well is because of its position on the equator. It's saying that because of where it is with temperature, with the kind of land it had, with the kind of animals you have, you're capable of getting more calories per acre. You're capable of having more immunities to different kind of diseases. All of these things, they continue to go on and on. But the people forget that the Earth is a globe. So obviously, not only did Western Europe exist on the green band belt equatorially, also those in the East did. What separates Western culture apart from all the other cultures in the world is that, and I think the best way to look at it is, what did you do when you were able to have the printing press? When you're able to mass produce some kind of language to be able to put out to the people so everyone could understand something. In the West, in the East, and in the Middle East, they wrote down laws. They said, hey, the elites say you can do this and you can't do this. You have to pay this much in taxes and you have to do this. But what happened in the West is it opened this incredible plane of a competitive nature between nations, where we started sharing ideas and trying to uplift our fellow man and neighbor. Because when we got the printing press, we started writing down ideas. We started writing down things that we wanted to come together as thought, to have the greatest minds in our entire cultures to be able to debate upon, so we could sharpen ourselves. Like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. So going back and forth makes us better people. And that's what happened with the West. And that's why we became such a superior kind of civilization. It has nothing to do with what's in our blood. It has to do with the incubator of thought that we've had for the last several hundred years. And this is why you can't just walk into another country, like somewhere in the Middle East, and hand them democracy and a republic. Because, in the Middle East, they have been living under a benevolent dictatorship for their entire history, for most of since the Caliphate. And that is the system that they know. So when you walk over there and you just hand them this kind of this freedom to select their leaders, well, once those people get elected, they have no concept of a leader who is incapable of being able to make rash action and be able to get everything through as soon as they decide it, because that's what they think that's supposed to happen. So the incubation of thought is what makes us so elite and so fantastic in this country, and that has to be preserved. And so when we're bringing people into our country, if they continue to bring in a brain rot where they're just trying to destroy our values, where they're trying to destroy our religions, where they're trying to destroy our cultural norms, it's going to make our country a worse place.
Yeah, and again, we can have anyone from any culture, any race, any creed, any color, whatever. They can all participate and be a part of this with us.
Absolutely.
So don't let these folks tell us otherwise. Before we shift gears, is there any questions on that, or any details that you guys would like to hear about what's going on in Springfield? Any questions along those lines? Raise your hand. And oh, by the way, we have citizen journalists that are there right now, documenting more and more of what's happened there and what's happened in front of the city council meetings and everything. So it's not a made up issue, sir.
So you're talking about communism a little bit. Can you talk about global corporatism and how that affects the world as well as a layer of fascism, and how public-private partnerships are working in accordance to take our tax dollars and to control what the people are doing in local communities?
Yeah, and I'll take part of that first.
Go ahead.
The COVID experiment, right? The pandemic was the most intense transfer of wealth, but also power that we've ever seen. And it transferred power into those global corporatist hands, right? The strength of our country comes from the entrepreneurship of small businesses. And most of our country is made up of small businesses. But you've seen this massive intentional transfer of power in order to move us down that line towards that globalism. And when I say communism, I think everybody here in this room should watch the movie Beneath Sheep's Clothing.
Yes.
Okay. Julie Bailing just put that out. We've got mutual friends like James Lindsay and Michael Fallon that participate in it. It's wonderful. And so many people are uncomfortable with calling what's happening communism or Marxism or all that because it doesn't look like it looked then. But what you don't understand is, it takes on elements of the culture. And so elements of the culture are those corporatists and the puppet masters that are controlling our politicians are all about this march. It's all of this kind of same vein using these Marxist techniques.
So I'll answer part of that question in two prongs. One, a lot of people, whenever we hear the term feudalism, we think that's something that existed when there were dukes, kings, and queens. But really what feudalism was essentially that they were people who are a landed aristocracy. They owned land. They were capable of being able to produce crops, being able to produce money, being able to levy taxes against their people, and then they had to pay that to whoever was their lord supremacist in that area. Now, we don't live in a time where people are landed aristocrats. We live in a time where people are, whether it's technological aristocrats, whether it's these massive multinational corporation aristocrats, whether it's these people who have amassed massive amounts of wealth. We're talking about companies like BlackRock who are capable of being able to buy out any, I always imagine there's some BlackRock 30-year-old guy who's just won a bidding war by outbidding a single mother with $1 million to buy a single family home so that they can turn our entire country into a land of renters so they can remove the idea of private land ownership. And then, so when you have all these areas, the problem is that the barrier to entry to be able to compete against these massive multinational corporations is so steep because, one, they're capable of paying off all of the governments in whichever country they are. They're capable of being able to siphon taxes through whichever system is best for them. And so, no, it's not a free market anymore when you're having to compete against people who are subsidized by the global elites in other countries. The second portion of that is when you start thinking about when you have corporations, multinational corporations, who make immense amounts of profits whenever there is some kind of emergency or whenever there is some kind of disaster. they then have a financial prerogative to try and create as many disasters and emergencies as possible. And then when you allow such a massive influx of capital into our political system here in the United States and across the world, they are then able to use congressmen, senators, presidents, everything like puppet strings to be able to say, hey, whether it's COVID, let's lock the entire country down and legitimately force every single American, and I assume many in this room, to be able to forcibly take a jab, so that way we have all these different companies who can make immense amounts of profit. And so that is really the lane that we're starting to go down. And the further we go along, the more powerful these entities become, the less ability we have to be able to compete against them and to have a fair marketplace advantage.
Yeah, and they use laws for sure, but what they really use to destroy actual free markets is the regulations, right? And the regulations, the big businesses are the ones that spend their time actually lobbying for them to bounce out their competitors. I tried to Google one time how many laws there are in the United States just to get an approximation. And you cannot. Okay.
Did you know the parliamentarian of the United States Congress does not know how many laws there are in the United States? That the person whose job it is to know every single law in the United States does not know how many laws there are. Then the reason they do this is because they no longer want the law to be knowable. They want it to be this unknowable thing, so that they're no longer asking, is this right or is this wrong? Now you're simply asking, is this legal or can I get away with this? And that is why we have elevated lawyers to be so powerful, and it's terrible. Miss Victoria, thank you for the coffee. Thank you guys in the back. That means a lot.
Yeah, so with the fact of that, so I the best I was able to come up with, by the way, was about 2 million laws, and that doesn't even take into consideration the millions of regulations, which are just as vicious and can destroy your business just as easily.
And regulations are created by people that are not elected and are nearly impossible to fire.
Good point. And that's actually a great transition. Well, let's hit any other questions on that or anything related to Springfield or anything. Anybody? All right, good. Well, I wanted to have you tell a little bit about your experience in Congress. So just recently, you and I had a conversation, I think it was in Detroit or wherever we were, about what it was like being a freshman and how much you saw that, oh, wow, they just bring you in to kind of capture you. Permanent Washington knows that the fighters and the people who actually love freedom and do not want to bend the knee to the Permanent Washington establishment won't last forever, right? And so they have a whole method to kind of swallow you guys up. And I'd love you to just talk about that experience.
Yeah, so when I first got elected to Congress, you start going through what they call freshman orientation. And that's where, they start leading you through the process of what it means to be a congressman and how you actually go about executing your duties. And I had this question that I was asking myself because the majority of people, when they get elected, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, of course, some of them, they think it's going to be the capstone to their career. It's the best job they'll ever have. They've been working towards it for 40 years. They've, quote unquote, been waiting in line for this position. But the majority of them are doing it out of a good heart. They're going there because they want to be good, patriotic Americans. And so I had this question, well, if that's how the majority of my freshman class is, if that's how the majority of most people when they get elected to Congress is, from what I've seen, what is it about this place that starts making these people into these globalist dogs who are just puppets for the mainstream media and for the elites of the world? And so I started wondering this to myself. And, when we're going through freshman orientation, I realized that basically the entire lesson they were trying to give you is like, oh, well, if you have a question on this vote, or if you have a question on what to do in this situation, you're just going to go ask the whip team. And then the whip team answers to the Speaker of the House. And so they're just consolidating power into one person, trying to make you feel like that's normal. Instead of just relying on your own staff and friends and intellect in your district to be able to make a decision what's good for you, they're trying to say, well, no, you don't need to represent your district. This is what we're doing as our team. But then when I really realized what the problem was, I was about to be sworn in as a member of Congress in the early days of January. So this was late December. And I had a call from a very high-ranking Republican, and they asked me to come to their office. I went in. I also like this person a lot, if you're listening. Personally, we have a great relationship. But they called me into their office. I go in. And it's about 11 o'clock at night. And then they said, we understand that, you said in your campaign you want to import most of your staff so that, you don't have these people who have been bought by the Washington establishment as your staffers. Because remember, who you hire as staff really is your policy, because you are given so many different laws, so many different things you have to read that you physically do not have the time to do so. So you have to rely on your staff to be able to give you what's important for you to know for whatever upcoming bill it is, because you normally have about 3 hours to read and process a 4,000-page bill. And so you have to rely on, a dozen members of your legislative team to be able to go through that and pick out the good pieces. But if you have someone that's bought by the establishment, they'll say, well, we don't need them to see that part that says something about red flag laws. We won't highlight that for the boss. And so, and this is one reason why they hate Elon Musk, because he's trying to create an open source piece which will basically dilute, and a piece of AI which will explain what's in all of our massive omnibus packages all the time. When I really realized how they capture you in Washington, D.C., I was brought into this high-ranking member of the Republican Party's office, and they said, we know you said you wanted to import your staff and all these things, but you know what? We created a list for you of some people that if you hired them as your chief of staff, and these are the people who lead your entire staff, as your chief of staff, then we would know that you're a team player. And so I took the list. I didn't know a single name on it, and I said, well, what do you mean by what is the benefit of being a team player? I'm like, oh, well, if we hear about some rumor circulating that might hit the news, we'll defend you from that. We'll make sure that if anybody's trying to primary you, we'll take them out of contention. If you're a team player, you'll be well protected. And I remember I took it. I was like, oh, well, thank you very much for letting me know that. And then as I was rolling out, I just very politely laid it down in the trash can and left. And that is when the war against the establishment began. And then from that point on, it was a blood sport. And you know what? I would do the exact same thing every single time. And I'm very young. We will take our country back before my life is over. I'm very confident about that. But anyways, I realize, because of how they've set up Washington, D.C., because of how they've set up the way that you're able to raise capital and raise money, if you're not what they consider a team player, then you are extraordinarily vulnerable. And you see this with all of the greats on our side. You see it with Matt Gaetz. You see it with Marjorie Taylor Greene. You see it with Jim Jordan. You see it with Byron Donalds. Whenever you are someone who doesn't bend the knee to the radical establishment, they attack you like mercilessly, and there's nothing you can do about it. But then when you see someone who you've never heard the name of because they don't actually do anything for their district or for the people of the United States of America, you'll look up their Wikipedia page, and it's as if Wikipedia is just in love with them. Like they're about to go out on a first date with the guy, saying, this is the best person in the world. But then you go read, one of probably the best congressmen in the United States, you go read Byron Donalds' Wikipedia page, and it looks like the guy's a career criminal. I mean, I'm serious. It's insane. And so anyways, it's just whenever they say that you're a team player, it means you're going to vote to send money overseas so they can be able to pocket more of the money into their own pockets.
Yeah, that's what I think you need to understand about things like Ukraine and why we're opposed, and I think I speak for us both here, in funding the Ukraine and sending billions of our dollars over there. It's a money laundering operation for our politicians and our big corporatists, right? It's very easy for them to hide where the money goes, right? It disappears. It's very easy for them to spread it around to the folks that they want to reward for being team players. How many of you guys, by show of hands, would like to see term limits?
Amen.
Bad idea. Bad idea. Okay, and I'm going to tell you why. So term limits...
Oh, Bryce, we're about to have a debate. Let's go.
So term limits, unless you fix Washington and dramatically scale back the size of our government and put power back into the hands of guys like Madison Cawthorn or Thomas Massie or these folks, term limits will never work, because all it does is shorten the lifespan of the people that can get in there and be good. Unless you have term limits and a way of getting rid of the staffers and the permanent guys that are the team players, you will not be able to succeed. In fact, it goes against us, and it goes against what we'd like to see. What we need to do, I mean, look, I'll give you guys the entire punchline of what we need to do in this country, and that's we need to have a revival for Jesus, right?
Yes.
Okay? We need to, if we're going to correct and right this ship, we need people to come to Christ, and we need to shrink the size of government and have morality reign supreme, not legality, right? You know, yes, we are a nation of laws. That's wonderful. But even Christians have gotten to the point where we ask, well, is that legal? Can we defend that? Can we, you know, rather than is that right or wrong? Unless we get back to that, we won't be running people for our government. We won't be able to entrust our government to good moral actors. And that's what we've lost. Our founding fathers talked a lot about this. But again, that's why I do not think term limits, which is very popular amongst our conservative set, is ever going to solve any problems.
So you know what, Bryce? We're actually not going to have a debate because of the caveat you made. HR 2002, I'm almost positive that's it. That was the term limit bill I introduced. It actually does. It puts term limits on members of Congress and the Senate. Well, which is longer. It's longer term than what most people want, because in reality, you do have to take. It does take, you know, a number of terms to be able to collect enough friends and enough favors in Washington D.C. to be able to push through radical change if you want to see that. But in that bill, it also put term limits on permanent Washington, on the bureaucrats and on the staffers. Because let me tell you, Washington, D.C. is like a revolving door. Let me explain to you why Donald J. Trump is so hated by the Washington establishment. Because he absolutely disrupted the most powerful people within the establishment. The guys you don't know the names of. These are like the staffers and the bureaucrats. He disrupted their career path. So you got to think, most people's lifespan in government is about 25 years as someone who's on government payroll or as a staffer or a political appointee. So the normal thing that you do is you go to Capitol Hill straight out of college, you become an intern, then you become, you know, as someone who stays at the front desk, then you become a legislative aide or you become a communications aide. Then you work your way up to a legislative director, or you work your way up to a district director, then you become a chief of staff. But then, after you serve 1 or 2 terms as a chief of staff, that's about after 15 years on the Hill, you then leave for about 2 years and go to what we call K Street, and that's where all the lobbying firms are. And then you go there and you work as some lobbyist for, you know, some random thing, but you're a minor player there. But what they're doing is they're trying to tell you what they want you to do when they send you back into Washington. And so then after you serve about 3 years on K Street, you go back, you find some young member of Congress who's a hotshot, and you say, hey, I'd like to be your chief of staff. And then, but this is my resume, I have a great resume, and I know the people on K Street, so I can help you raise money. And then when you become their chief of staff, you start directing, not on behalf of the district that your member represents, but you start directing your member to vote on behalf of the lobbying firm that you previously worked for. And then you push through these bills that are going to make their companies that they lobby for a significant amount of money. After you do that for about 2 terms, you've been there for about 20 years, and then the last 5 years, you go back onto K Street. You serve about 5 years in whether a board position or an executive position, and you get paid millions and millions of dollars, and that is how your money is made in Washington, D.C. So the last 5 years of your career on the Hill or in Washington is where you truly make all your money, and that is the main lifespan of someone who works in Washington, D.C. Now, when Donald J. Trump got elected, he came in, he said, I don't know you people, I don't like you people, I want to bring in normal Americans. And so he disrupted the entire economic plan for at the time, the most powerful permanent Washington members in Washington, D.C., because now that they are on K Street, they knew that they were not going to be able to manipulate the incoming president. And so nothing, even if they can get it through Congress, even if they can get it through the Senate, it's not going to be signed on the desk of the president because they didn't have that kind of hold over him. And that is why permanent Washington hates him so much. That's just a little tidbit into what it looks like to be someone who works on the Hill.
And you know, one of the ways that you could solve that problem, by the way, is to break up D.C. and to put some of these departments actually where they should live. Like the Department of Agriculture should not be in D.C. You know, there's many departments that shouldn't be centered there because it's not people that have the interest in actually whatever their community or whatever that department is really,
and
whatever their mission is.
Also, Bryce, and since I know we're among so many friends here on both online and here in person, I'm just going to say we need to take it a step further. Washington, D.C. and our federal government should be significantly less important who your congressman and senator is for in Washington than who your local county commissioner is and who the speaker of your state house is. Because what Washington should be concerned about is making sure that we have phenomenal foreign trade deals, making sure that 2, we will never be invaded and our military is the most feared thing on the entire planet, and 3, that we have good interstates. Aside from that, keep Washington, D.C. the hell out of our lives. Let your local governments handle everything. That is the reason that we became a republic. Because let me tell you, you cannot govern somewhere like Washington State the same way that you're gonna govern a manufacturing center of the country. You cannot govern somewhere like Miami, Florida, which is based so much on whether it's on different kind of money groups and different kind of hedge funds, and then so much tourism. The same way that you're going to be able to manage and govern a place like Wisconsin. They're just such radically different states. We need to be, and I mean, you think about it, our country is roughly the size of the entire European Union. And so I, in my mind, the way that America should look is our states, which already are so radically different, but the laws in each of our states should be so radically different that you can move to a state which identifies with your values, so that you're not trying to force down through the Department of Education what you believe someone in the mountains of Western North Carolina needs to be believing, because that's what you believe living in L.A. And I know that Idaho has a lot of former Californians in it, and I just want to say congratulations on getting out of there.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that's the whole purpose of the Electoral College, was to keep power within the states, right? To keep that representation within the states. If somebody in New York is deciding, what a farmer in Kansas should be doing, that's completely inappropriate. But that's what will happen if all we have is the popular vote. And so that's why the Electoral College exists, and that's why and that's why they hate it, right? And that's why they want to disband it. And you hear that talk all the time: is one person, one vote. It should just be popular vote deciding the president of the United States, and that would be the worst thing that would ever happen to us. I would love to tell a little bit more of your story. So I'll set it up and I'll ask you this question, because I want you to tell the Donald Trump story you told me. Also in Detroit the last time we were hanging out together. So, Madison, the full force of the apparatus and Permanent Washington went after him on a friend's podcast. John Lovell, shout out to Warrior Poet Society.
Great guy.
Our buddy John. On his podcast, Madison got a little loose and revealed some of the sexual deviancy and some things that exist in Washington, even among our own party members, right? And in doing so, brought the full force of everybody against him. And they put out all kinds of stupid stuff, and including pictures that they made it like you were a sexual deviant that happened to be on a cruise ship game show in front of his family and friends. And they played all of these games, right, in order to do this. And that's the game that they play. And then they went and they primaried him. And Donald Trump called you to give you some words of encouragement. But talk about what he said about picking the fights.
Well, one, he said, Madison, I think you got a little out in front of your skis. And I won't go into all the details because I don't like delving into what President Trump says privately. But he did make a really great point, which was saying you need to pick your battles. Like, you went against Big Pharma, you went against the military-industrial complex, you went against the Federal Reserve, and he kind of chuckled on that one because that's just the most dangerous entity in the world to go against. And then he said, you went against all of these things at the same time, and then you went after all of everybody on Washington on the Hill. And he was just saying, you can't have that many enemies at one time. He said, I can't have that many enemies at one time. He's like, you're not powerful enough for that yet. And so anyways, he was giving me some good advice in that bit right there. But I will tell you, it wasn't just that they then primaried. They literally changed my state constitution inside of North Carolina so they could redraw the district lines of my district, take me from a hard red district of the mountains of North Carolina to then the most liberal city in all of North Carolina, Asheville. And then they decided to primary. I mean, it was the most coordinated attack I've ever seen in my entire life, whether it was through the media, whether it was through people on the Hill, or whether it was through and let me tell you, you really saw who your friends were when that was going down. And we have, I would say we have about 30 members of Congress. We have a few more now. I think we have I would put it about 41 members of Congress in the Republican Party. that are on our side and on the people's side. And so, anyways, it was an exciting time. But
Yeah, which I mean, to think about that, we got 41. It's you can almost count the number of people that we could trust on our hands. And there's but most of them cannot be controlled. Some of it's personality strengths that they have. Some of it's guys like Thomas Massey, who lives so far off the grid that he wants nothing from them, and he does care about his constituents. So. I see we got a question in the back.
All right, somebody texted in a question. You brought up lobbying earlier, and their questions about IPAC and what influence over Congress Israel has through this lobbying. Any comments on that?
It is probably, I would say, the most powerful lobbying force in Washington, D.C. Thomas Massey made a point that most members of Congress have, basically their representative from this political organization. And it's essentially controlled by a foreign government. And I think that, again, the amount of money that can be siphoned through politics is truly dangerous. And it's not only that, these people are then able to not only buy politicians, but they can buy favors within the media. And I'm talking about just almost every single super PAC in the world at this point. You have all these super PACs that are able to buy favors inside of the media, by whether they're paying for a ridiculous amount of ad spend on a news station, whatever it is, and then they can request that certain stories get leaked, that certain things happen to somebody. And so it's not just the financial contributions they give you; they also give you a lot of political cover in the terms of what happens in the news.
Go ahead.
No, if you go for it.
Well, I just want to also touch on something that we get in trouble on there, and it's intentional, right? Some of those lobbying groups will levy anti-Semitic accusations against people who are calling out the secular government of Israel. And we are called as Christians to love the Jewish people. We are also called to evangelize them, right? There's an opportunity there. We are called to love them, support them, and we will be blessed. But it is not anti-Semitic to call out the misdeeds of a foreign government, especially a secular foreign government that can do some bad things, right? And you can. I think do both. Both can be true. We can love the Jewish people, and we can also condemn the bad actions of a secular government and not be anti-Semitic. And I've had this discussion on my show with Rabbi Barkley, who I love, and other Jewish friends of mine. We can do both, and we can call out the ADL that's run by a completely left-wing Marxist evil dude.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. Yeah, a little bit, somewhat related. You touched on this a little bit, but how about the control of the deep state has over members with blackmail and honeypotting?
Well, that is a phenomenal question. I tell members of Congress all the time, if you are in a random bar where if you're in like Miami or LA, of course you're going to run into a lot of outrageously beautiful women. But if you're in a random bar in, I don't know, Des Moines, and you're just hanging out there, and then the most beautiful girl you've ever seen in your life walks into that bar and then is so interested in you and thinks you're the funniest guy in the world and that you're the most handsome man on the planet. Brother, she's 40 years younger than you, and you have never been that funny in your life. I promise you, she is there to acquire blackmail on you. It is... And then they do these kind of things, and then they get photographs of it, and it doesn't even have to be photographs. It can just be some kind of a sexual hold that they have over you. They will exploit you in whatever way they can find. But no, you have to be very careful about what we call honeypots. And again, honeypots are just, whether it's young women, young men, whatever it is, that they send into your life to try and be able to capture you, to hold that over you. And especially if you're married with a family, then they say, oh, well, we could send this manila envelope to your daughter in college of you cheating on her mother. Or you could vote to send money to Ukraine. It's your choice. My dear friend Tim Burchett brought this up in a really, really incredible way. He's from Tennessee. He's a great guy. But he has the same thing. It's like, brother, I promise you're not that funny. That girl does not like you that much.
Yeah, I'm. By the way, politics is where ugly people go to get celebrity status. Not this guy, of course, but. But it is their thing. I want to say a little bit about that though too, because I know we know, and I'm not gonna call people out openly, but we've got mutual friends that we've seen be compromised in that fashion. that we love, and we saw their voting stance and record change, and we've seen that over and over again. They will do everything they can to find something on you, or they're just going to make things up and then threaten you with the made-up stories and the made-up things.
I mean, they paid off one of my friends to get my iCloud password to then go pull up pictures of me as a teenager. And I'm like, man, if you had an iPhone when you were a teenager, what kind of pictures would you have? Like, I'm sorry I got in a fist fight when I was 17. Like, what does that have to do with me voting on Ukraine?
All right. Speaking of fist fights, maybe, I don't know. Depends how you answer this question. Where'd that shiner come from? Is there a good story?
You know what, man loves a dangerous game, and it's just an
he always
exciting
thinks
life.
he's tough enough to mess with.
Yeah,
me.
I thought I
It's
could
like,
take
come on.
Bryce Eddy in a fight.
I told him I'll knock over that chair, bro.
He said shut up. I thought he said stand up. Next thing you know, yeah, it was terrible. But yeah. Sir in the red shirt. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman right here? Also, I had a guy wearing a Kanai chest holster just a second ago. There you are. Dude, love it. Great choice.
Hey guys, is this working?
Yeah, we got you.
Thank you for doing this here. I was hoping, as you talk about the states, you could talk about the attacks on the states. Right now, Idaho has been moving to the red. The establishment is not happy, and along comes ranked choice voting, which is here to sink us.
Is that first past the post?
Well, yeah. So ranked choice voting. So what ranked choice voting is, and they're working here in Idaho, and they're doing this all over the country. So this is relevant to any red state. So ranked choice voting and open primaries, those are blue solutions for red states. It's expressly designed so that it neuters conservatives in a state. So here's what that means. So ranked choice voting is where by computer, we as voters will select our candidates and rank them order of preference. So if he's super liberal and I'm super far right, okay,
Let's switch that around. You're from California, Bryce.
So if I'm super liberal and he's super far right, we're going to pick according to that. So we're both going to pick the best candidate that we like, from our respective values. And then next is going to be our choice that, okay, that guy's pretty good. Maybe he's a Republican, or maybe he's a Democrat in a Republican skin suit, but he still likes him, right? And thinks he's not going to be so bad. And then the third guy, who knows? We don't know that much about him. He's not that bold on any issues, whatever. Okay, maybe we can live with him. He'll be our third choice. So what that ends up doing is nobody really gets their first choice because it'll continue to recalculate and redo it via electronic voting system, so you don't even have an insight into that, and it'll end up picking our third choice. So the second and third choice always wins. Well, not only does that over time always trend towards the left, right? It doesn't really trend towards the right. It always trends toward the left. It makes it to where you will never have an authentic person running because they will never stand on any issues that might alert you to what they're really going to do. And all of a sudden, all of your politics are going to go left. All of your politics are going to be headed up by people who you don't know what direction they're going to go. But most of the time, it's a hard left because that's truth and honesty is generally not a value on the left.
And also, truth and honesty is not generally rewarded within the electorate. And so that is definitely a way that the left is trying to control red states. But the most dangerous thing, I think, for red states is open primaries, which sounds like a good thing because it's saying, oh, well, we want to be able to capture these independent voters who are not a part of either party. We want them to be able to vote in our primary. So you shouldn't have to pick a primary ballot. You should just be able to vote for whoever you want. But just going back to my election in 2022, we had over 4,000 Democrats who are what we call 4x4 voters. They never miss an election. We had 4,000 Democrats in a midterm election switch parties to then vote in my primary, and then by the time the general election came back, had switched back as Democrats. And that is just a way that they're trying to influence the vote. Say, hey, well, we really don't like that guy, but this guy could be controlled, so we'll just vote for him. And so these are dangerous things that they do. So we should have closed primaries, and I think the way that most red states run. I think the voting system in Florida, aside from when the primaries held, is a phenomenal system. It's one of my favorites in the state, in the country.
Yeah, I mean, DeSantis did.
Sorry, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to follow up that conversation. I appreciate it and point out that is what Prop 1 is, Proposition 1 on the Idaho ballot. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. They're trying to sell it as open primaries.
Yeah, vote no on Prop.
Vote
1.
no on Prop 1, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, this is again the way the enemy that we are fighting, again, capital E enemy, and those that are his useful idiots and minions. They are getting busy and doing everything and anything they can to destroy what God has established here in this country. They're going to do everything and they will never stop. And most of us, and this is a sad thing, this is a call out. I mean, I know this is not this room, but if you have friends in your churches and friends in your circle that are not voting, what we call the low propensity voters, that's how we win. Is if you were to just get 75% of the people in your church to be voting, we would never lose again.
Never.
Probably if you got 50%, honestly.
It's absolutely correct.
All right, might be a similar answer here, but what can we do besides voting for constitutional conservative candidates? What can we do as we the people to stop and help fight the over-sexualization of children?
Run for local office. I mean, the truth is, there's multiple multiple answers to this, but the first and foremost thing is we need to run ourselves and we need to participate, and we need to participate at the lower local offices and at the school boards, and become a librarian. And all of those are the people that are driving from the cultural kind of grassroots some of the most devious things that are going on with our kids. We have a generational problem right now. This is going to require a generational solution. And so that means that we have to also route out the people that are even here in Idaho, the majority of the people that are doing the bureaucratic jobs are left-leaning. And we need to take those jobs over, and it starts at that grassroots level, at that local level.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this goes, especially talking about the sexualization of children. If that does not infuriate you enough to be willing to get incredibly uncomfortable, to be willing to do things that you normally wouldn't do because you're just like, oh, well, you live your life, I'll live my life. No, at some point, in my mind, my political philosophy is, as long as whatever you're doing doesn't hurt my life or my property, then by all means, you should have the freedom to do that. You're a consenting adult. But if something that you're doing is trying to meddle in the minds of young children to be able to damage them in the future or damage them in the present, then you are evil. I have no pity for you. I will hunt you like the demon that you are. We should be willing to get incredibly uncomfortable with these people, hunt them down in every fashion that we can find, call them out on social media, make them uncomfortable in public. I'm telling you, these people are evil. They are trying to destroy innocent young people and make them just these hollow shells that they can then manipulate in the future.
Yeah, and listen, sexual deviants don't procreate, they recruit. And this is all part of it. They have to warp the minds of the young, and they talk about this. They write about this. They write books about queer critical theory and all of those sort of things. And they say that we're gonna put so much glitter into your kids that it's gonna be glitter in the carpet. I think is something along the lines of the quote. They are going after our children. They write about it. The World Economic Forum, Noah Yuval Noah Harari, and guys like that write about how they want to take over the minds of people. They talk. I mean, a quote from him is something along the lines of, "What are we going to do with all these useless people?" So they envision us as potentially useless in the future in their feudalism 2.0. He says, "I know it's going to be a combination of video games and drugs." That is who we're fighting, and those are the people that are behind all of this nonsense. And when you stand up, even in a small local community, when you stand up, and Mark knows about this, when you stand up against them, they come after you in every way possible. I said, and I'm very disciplined about how I say things because I want people to know that we love the wayward, right? and it is our job to evangelize them. It's our job to call them to Christ. But I said very simply, publicly, on my show, that it is evil to tell children that happiness lies on the other side of puberty blockers and genital mutilation. And I had a team of people calling every single one of my clients, every single one of my business associates, and telling them that I was promoting hate online.
It truly is terrible. And this is one quote that I think is just so powerful. But it is, if you are unwilling to be uncomfortable in this day and age, standing up for what's right is going to make your life harder. You're going to lose some friends. You're going to have to deal with some kind of drama in your life for it. It'll make your life harder, but it'll make your children, your grandchildren's lives easier. And if you're not willing to do that, then you and I just are not the same person, because better that trouble comes in the time that we are in control so that our children can live just happy, fruitful, and joyous lives. But because I mean, genuinely, when you think about it, I think of what Esther's uncle told her all the time, is that you were born for such a time as this. Think of the trust that God has put inside of you to have you be alive at this time right now, when they know that there is a mind game and they're playing for keeps for the next generation. But God selected all of us to be alive right now so that we could be the ones to fight it, because he knew that we were shrewd enough, he knew that we were smart enough, and he knew that we were courageous enough to be able to stand up knowing that he has our back, to be able to take these people on head on so that we can save the next generation. It truly is all of our duties.
Yeah, and I have a regular message that I give to the young folks, right? Because this is a generational issue for young parents. You need to get busy, have lots of kids, right? Have lots of kids and train them up in the way that they should go, and be intentional about it. You're going to have to be countercultural about it too. That means it's pretty easy to throw a screen at them during a dinner and things like that. You need to stop that. You need to get that out of their lives. They cannot be raised by that. There is a researcher right now. He just was on Joe Rogan's show, but I saw him in 2018 at an event, and he's a liberal guy. This is a Hillary Clinton supporter that researches what the tech companies do to manipulate our minds. And he uncovered how much, just on YouTube, how much they do in inserting violent images, split-second violent images, pornographic images, things like that into these kids in order to get them addicted, because the nefarious goal there is screen time. And they trap and suck these kids in using all of the best research that they have on how to addict people to things. And so this guy's name is Robert Epstein, and Robert...
No relation.
No relation. But anyway, what he does, he talks about the ephemeral search results and things like that. So when you and maybe some of you guys saw it, I screen captured this and posted it. But when you, right after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, if you typed in assassination attempt on, it would not populate for Donald Trump. You would write Don. It would say Donald Reagan. It would say Truman. It would say every single other, Lincoln, all this stuff, unless you typed it all the way out and hit enter, okay? And the reason that they were doing that is because they wanted to memory hold that event. And you saw them go through this process that they do to our minds. At first, they went, oh no, okay, here's this picture. Here he is, fight, fight, fight. Oh, we've lost this election. Okay, what do we do here? Well, let's diminish it first. Oh, it was a piece of glass shard. It really wasn't a big deal.
Who cares? He got shot.
It wasn't a bullet. It was, it was a fragment of a bullet. It was a, piece of his teleprompter, all these sort of things. Big deal. Oh, where's the major wound? Let's make up some ballistics stuff and let's say that an AR, would have blown his head off just being near his ear. They're doing all kinds of, total horse crap. Then what did they do just a week or so later after that? It was staged. It was fake. It was a blood packet. This was designed to get him, votes. This was designed to make him look like a hero.
He's a registered Republican that shot at him.
Yeah, primary voter. We talked about that. So that's their game. That's what they do. But those autofill ephemeral search results that disappear, the suggestions that they make when you're looking up YouTube videos. All of that stuff guides and manipulates our minds, and they can sway 10 million votes just by auto-populate on your phones. So, that's the stuff that we have to understand. These are evil, wicked people that are messing with our minds.
That's absolutely correct. And then also when you're talking about the minds of children and what they're doing to you by trying to this programming, I mean, you look at the algorithms. This is actually what made me decide to run for Congress, is when my congressman left to be chief of staff to Donald Trump, left a position open. When I started talking to the other candidates who were thinking about running, you'd ask them, hey, what do you think about how they have different algorithms in Eastern Asia than they do here in the West for social media platforms? And, I would have these guys with pleated pants and tasseled loafers. They just start saying, oh, well, I mean, math is the same anywhere, and algorithm is the same no matter where it's at. I'm like, I don't really think we're talking the same language here. And so when you start seeing that, in Eastern Asia, where a lot of these, tech companies are created and the software for them is designed, you can see that when you want to go what we call going viral over there as a young person in one of their countries, you have to do it because you did something with science and technology, or something amazing for patriotism, or you accomplished some amazing physical feat, or something amazing about history, things that we would all deem as honorable acts. If you want to do it here, you have to be some ridiculously queer-looking 14-year-old boy saying, oh, well, get ready with me, I'm going to do my makeup, and my mom's going to bring me this weird food, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, again, it's the feminization of our culture. That is their number one priority, whether it's through our water supply by trying to lower our testosterone, through microplastics trying to lower the testosterone. They are after the next generation of men, because I will tell you, they are afraid of men who carry guns and who are willing to stand up and say, whoa, you can't do that to my family. And I will tell you, the number one mistake that I think the left made is by so bluntly on the nose going after children. Because I will say, the generation that came before me of Republicans, and primarily the men in the Republican Party, who just, said, oh, we're going to go along to get along. We don't want to rock the boat too much. It was not until they started going after the children that then the mama bears got involved. And let me tell you, there's no one I would want to mess with less than a mother who's pissed off about the dangers that her child is facing. And then they got all of their men involved. And I think that's why you're seeing such a resurgence of populist and conservative beliefs in our community, because you have all these great moms who are saying, I need you to step up and be a man and defend our children. Let's go. Get involved. And I think that's just what a lot of young women are looking for today inside of a spouse. And I will tell you, that is what they fear the most. They're trying to remove testosterone from our entire society, and then trying to feminize the next generation of young boys. So then if they do want to take your private property, if they do want to say you can't own this, if they do want to say, hey, you can't go do that, there's going to be no one who can oppose them, because everyone's going to say, oh, well, they know best. It's whatever the experts say. No, the experts are stupid. I would trust the advice of a 70-year-old farmer from northern Florida more than I would trust any kind of a PhD. You look at the buildings that people in the Middle Ages, illiterates, built versus what a PhD architect builds today. The beauty, I mean, these people should be arrested for the kind of disgusting buildings that these people build. I'm serious. We have such an ugly culture. You drive past any shopping center in America and you say that's an affront to society, versus driving through, some old town that's built with stones with absolutely no excavators, no machine operated vehicles, anything like that. And they built more beautiful buildings. And I know that sounds like a minor point, but I'm telling you, being able to view beautiful things encourages your mind to go to a higher place, saying, I want to accomplish great things. Looking at art of these incredibly jacked and toned men, and looking at art of incredible people who stood up and tried to save their country, is significantly more important to encouraging you to be a better person in your country than looking at some kind of art of, well, this is a banana taped to a wall, and it's going to cost you $130,000 because we believe in tax evasion, which I'm not necessarily against, because we pay way too much in taxes.
Tax avoidance.
Legal tax avoidance.
Well, listen, along those veins, I mean, God created beauty. And it's why in godless cultures you see things looking hideously ugly and plain. And all you have to do is see what the Soviet Union did under communism, or what North Korea looks like. Everything is ugly facades. And that's why the left has destroyed art. It's destroyed comedy. Listen, God's funny. He designed comedy, right? The left has destroyed everything that God has created, and that is their objective, truly. Going back to what Madison was talking about with testosterone, so that's called the early andropause effect, and it is a real thing. If you were to measure testosterone of someone in the World War II generation at 25, it would be in the 800 to 1200 range. If you measure that today, they'll tell you that healthy is 2 to 300 routinely, and that is a complication based on the way we eat. The poisons in our food, seed oils, the hormone-laden meats, all of those sort of things, plus the plastics that you mentioned. Don't drink out of plastic water bottles. Plus sedentary lifestyles, right? When you work out. Gym bros, you got to work out your legs, man. That releases testosterone.
Okay, I tried. I can't walk, Bryce. Come on.
Hey, stand up for us.
Hey, Bryce, what's going on with your hairline? Well, guys,
this is testosterone right here.
Well, guys, I know that you could listen to two guys talk on the news anytime you ever want to, but I just want to open up the floor. I don't know whether it's on the live stream or here in person. If you guys have some questions, be willing to ask us about anything. Let's get exciting here.
There's 1,000 people watching right now, roughly 1,000 on X, and I don't think they heard you guys talking earlier about this. But you are open carrying today firearms. Why are you doing that? What are you carrying? And then any other general comments about the Second Amendment?
Well, I'm currently carrying a Staccato 2011, shoots 9 millimeters. I've got subsonic bullets because I like to suppress my weapons. I think we're carrying a Terran Tactical upgraded Glock right now with a thigh strap. But this is a Kanai chest holster, which I love. I got a brother in the audience wearing the same thing right now, and I love it. But I will tell you, I think the reason that, one, when I was told this is an open carry event, I was like, that is what I'm talking about. Because I believe in something which is just, radicalized to normalize. Moving the Overton window because most people are saying, they think guns belong in a safe and that you should only have a shotgun. And the Second Amendment's all about being able to go hunting. No, the Second Amendment is about shooting tyrants in the face. When people want to come take your freedom, when they want to take your children, they want to take your religion, it's about being able to stand up and defend yourself. That is what the Second Amendment is all about. And so when people are saying, oh, well, you know what? The Second Amendment applied to muskets and then cannons back in the day. First of all, those are military-grade weapons in that time. And if you want to say that the First Amendment applies to and the improper search and seizure applies to things that you do online today, it's obvious that the Constitution is evergreen. It moves with the times, and so whatever are the arms that are available to our government should also be available to the people. I detest when I see a police force that is significantly more well-armed than the community that they live in. Because I will tell you, armed communities are much nicer and safer communities. I have never seen someone who wants to be a mass shooter go into a gun store to go and do so. They always go to places where you cannot carry weapons, whether it's in schools, whether it's inside of movie theaters, or whether it's in churches. They want to go for soft targets. And so I think that it's a duty for most people. Most people, if you have the ability, especially young men in the country, carry a weapon. You are your own first responder.
Yeah, and I do think we have a duty as Americans to do it. The Overton window is a great thought along those lines. But firearms aren't for everyone, but if you are an American, I do think because of the times that we're in, you should own a gun, but a gun is not a holy talisman, right? It doesn't automatically protect you. You need to train with it. You need to understand your weapon. It should be like working out. It should be a regular part of your practice, learning to defend yourself. I own a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, longtime mixed martial artist, and people will call me and say, hey, I'd like to learn some self-defense. I said, no, listen, I don't teach that here. I teach you how to fight, okay? If you can learn to fight, you can defend yourself, but I think that we need to be less passive in our culture, even with our ideas and our language. We need to be strong, dangerous people and have it under voluntary control because we love Christ and we are moral beings. They are doing everything they can to neuter us, to neuter our strength, to destroy us, and that is what this entire attack is about.
And this is a thought that's stolen from Jordan Peterson, who I love almost all of his thoughts. But he was saying that if you have no capability of violence, you're not a peaceful person. You're just helpless. Whereas if you're someone who knows how to defend yourself and knows how to be able to fight, and you choose not to, you keep that sword sheathed, then you are a peaceful person because you have the ability to do so, but you are choosing, because of your love for your fellow man, to not do so. And another thing that I also carry an IFAC, which is a medical kit underneath my wheelchair all the time, because if you're ready to make holes, I think you should also be ready to fill holes. Like we are here to preserve human life
And patch them up.
Patch them up.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll say one thing before that question along those lines. Christians should stop aspiring to be nice. Okay? Nice is not a positive value. Nice is weakness, okay? It's passivity. What you need to be is kind. Kind comes from a position of strength. That idea of having the sword, knowing how to use it, but keeping it sheathed, that is kindness. That's the picture of meekness.
Yes.
And we confuse meekness with weakness. That is not the definition of the word meek. It is being a dangerous person, but again, having it in submission to the Lord.
As I wanted to go back to the talk of the English language, and what I wanted to say, and maybe you can speak to, is that I've seen in the homosexual community they continue to co-opt terms and images. First, the rainbow, then the term gay, which used to mean joyful. Now the trans are using the term trans joy parade. Can you talk a little bit about the co-opting of the English language and Western culture, Western civilization, and how we have to take those symbols and those words back and not let them redefine them?
Yeah, and I will tell you, this is one of the things they try to do. They always try to change our language all the time, to take words that we all think are normal and words that we've said for our entire lives, and then try to make them some of the kind of ridiculous slur that should get you thrown inside some kind of cultural jail. That is what they try to do. That's why they change definitions all the time. They're saying, oh, well, like I have people who come up to me and say, hey, man, I just want you to know I don't see you as disabled. I'm like, I'm in a freaking wheelchair. What do you mean I'm not disabled? And then they'd be like, well, no, I think you're just differently abled. I'm like, I don't know why you're saying that. That doesn't do anything for me. I'm still in a wheelchair. Like, you're not making me any happier. But they want to change these words all the time so that words lose meaning. Because the difference is that words mean something to those of us in the conservative movement and on the right. And that's why, especially in the very beginning, when they would call us a racist or they would call us, a homophobe or a xenophobe, it would make us almost recoil because you say, whoa, I'm not a racist. What are you talking about? I don't even see color. They say, oh, well, that's a big problem. You have to see color. And it's like, why should I do that? And it's because they want us to shut up and sit down. And so they always want to be able to have something to where we think, oh, wait, we're being discourteous by doing this. And so I think that's the reason they're trying to co-opt our language so much. And again, with the whole gay movement, it is so ridiculous. And I mean, you know what? Again, if you are consenting adults, you're not pushing on kids like LG and B. I'm not for it, but that is a decision for you to make. I'm not going to attack the community aggressively, but everything after that, like the LGBTQI plus blah blah blah, whatever they want to say, that's all freaking weird stuff, and that should be made fun of because it's just really freaking weird. And so, anyways, that's.
Yeah, I was trying to find it, and I can't now. And but I'll paraphrase James Lindsay, who's a good friend of ours, and
phenomenal man.
And James is one of the clearest thinker on these things. But they pervert language intentionally, right? And he was starting to call them lexicographic terrorists. But yeah, they do it intentionally, and they play word games with you to also keep you on your back feet and keep you on the defense. And the truth is, we need to go on the offense. They use euphemisms also because you cannot, if you don't properly define something, you cannot solve it. It's why they use the word homeless, right? And we as the right will adopt many of these terms. And the fact is it's not homelessness that our cities are suffering under. It's the oppression of mental health issues and drug addiction.
Yes.
And it's the laws and policies that we've created. But again, if you cannot define something properly, you cannot solve the problem.
Yeah, and again, they just want to move the goalposts all the time. And again, if there's no hard set definitions of words, they can move the goalposts and say, well, that's not exactly what I meant. They're able to try and think they can outmaneuver you in a debate. But also, one thing that is so pathetic about the left is that these people will not debate you. They refuse to have a debate with you because they will just all of a sudden, as soon as you start saying, oh, well, I don't believe that because of this, these examples, this historical background, all of these things, what is their number one response? Well, you're just a racist then, and then they'll walk away.
Yeah, it's because their ideas suck. Let's be honest.
None of them have worked in all of history, but they say, oh, well, that's because it wasn't real communism. Like, I don't know what you're talking
Well,
about.
it's because I wasn't in charge.
Exactly. This is also a reason why I think this pertains to your questions. I think cigars will save the country. I know that we're all sitting here. They've got a cigar owner over here. It's great.
Yeah.
There we go.
Let's give a plug to CJ in the vault.
Yeah, you're fantastic. The first time there last night, I'm buying a locker. You're awesome. But moving on about that, there's a reason why I think cigars will save the country. One, and I don't mean this super literally, but if you smoke a cigar with a group of people, you are instantly locking yourself into at least a 20-minute conversation. And I have found that the majority of Americans, because of the billions or perhaps even trillions at this point, billions of dollars that has been spent in some form of programming since you were a child, whether it's through mainstream news, through the Department of Education, through what you consume on your phone, through what you consume through your literature. Most people have about 10 to 11 minutes worth of pre-recorded responses that they have just been taught over time. Oh, this is where I stand on this issue. This is where I stand on this issue. Oh, well, I don't think we should call them illegal immigrants. You know, they're undocumented migrants. Whatever kind of crap they want to pull. But once you get people past the amount of time that they have these pre-recorded responses in their head that have been programmed into them, they then have to start using critical thinking. And if you can have a conversation where you have to force someone to start having to use their brain and think about something with common sense, all of a sudden their arguments fall apart. When you start talking to somebody about something and they have to actually think about it, it's like, well, yeah, no, why would some company try and go through the amount of money for R&D if the government's just going to steal the patent from them? Then no one's going to have an incentive to make anything and to better the country through their inventions and through their designs, because nobody has any financial incentive for it. And so, again, I think that taking back our language and being able to master the art of communication makes you a very dangerous threat to the establishment.
Yeah, and along those lines, parents of conservatives and parents in general, but parents of conservative parents have made an egregious error. And that is they have thought that through osmosis of just living in this conservative family, the kids are going to know why they believe what they believe. Half the times, the adults don't know why they believe what they believe because they just grew up in conservative home or church or whatever, right? And the fact is if you do not around the dinner table talk about why we believe what we believe, then your kid is going to come into a university as a conservative and leave as a lefty who hates you. And that is, you're playing Russian roulette with their lives. It will happen more often than not that they will come out hating you and everything that you stand and believe for because some professor will fill in that narrative and tell them that what they're thinking is stupid in front of a class, and all their classmates will be like, yeah, that's stupid. But if they know why they believe what they believe, then they can defend it, and they'll be immune or at least resistant to those effects.
Completely agree with that. And this is one thing. I was out at some function with a group of friends, and this was kind of a newer group of friends, and I had two of my best friends with me, and then we were hanging out with some people I didn't know. And somebody was telling me a story. He's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this person started talking about the debate the other day." And I was just like, I thought everything they were saying was dumb, but I didn't want to offend anybody, and so I didn't say anything about it. And me and my best friends, and then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that was the right thing." We all instantly shut that down. We said, "No, that is what has gotten us to the point that we are in." By just saying, you know what, I'm going to keep my opinions to myself. The whole ideology that religion and politics should never be brought up in public discourse has destroyed our country. I'm serious. When people, I've had people complain to me sometimes like, "Man, all you ever talk about is religion and politics." I was like, what else is there to talk about? I mean, these are the things that define our entire world.
Yeah, and our churches are complicit in this, right? We were sold a lie many years ago in exchange for tax status, and we stopped talking about politics. Politics are simply how we organize ourselves. That's a simple definition, and churches and Christians need to participate in that. And if you're going to a church that doesn't believe in that, find another church. Oh, by the way, we planted one here in Idaho, and we believe in
Sunday.
talking about these things. So Dayspring.
Yeah.
Star, Idaho.
Well, anyways, before we end this, does anybody have any more questions? Let's go.
So this is a question that we ask all of our guests. So we're gonna call this the Madison Minute here. You're gonna look in that camera right in front of you there, and you're gonna pretend that every American is gonna be forced to listen to you for 60 seconds. I'm gonna talk really slowly so you have a few seconds to think.
I'm ready.
Okay. Every American, you get 60 seconds. They're forced to hear you. What would you tell them right now?
I will tell you the number one thing about our country that makes us so unique and so powerful is that in our country, we only kneel for the flag. Well, we kneel for the cross and we stand for the flag. I will tell you, I think that really captures who we are as people, because in this country, the only king that we serve is Jesus Christ. You are the royalty inside of your own country. Your home is your castle. Your family is the court of all around you. And whatever is within your fiefdom, it is your design to make it better. Your neighbors are your allies. I will tell you that whenever people say that it's a radical thing to go out and try and say the exact same talking points that every celebrity believes in, every major corporation, every news anchor believes in. That's so wrong. This is specifically designated towards young people. Be a radical for freedom. I will tell you, the people who say that the youth cannot change this country simply do not know American history. I mean, you look at the majority of the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. You look at all these incredible people. They were in their young 20s when they stood up against the most powerful empire the world had ever known up to that point. And whenever people say, oh, well, you're such a minority compared to all these mega conglomerates and all these massive blue cities, how could you ever win? In the Capitol Rotunda, if you look up at it, there is a part of it where there's the story of America. And when you look up at it, when it goes to the actual War of the Revolution, you see this massive flank of just redcoats who are lined up in perfect precision, and there's probably over 100 people designated there. And then you see a group of about 5 people, which were the patriots who fought in the Revolution. And I asked somebody one time, man, why did they just portray it, even though we won, as if we had so few people fighting this war? Remember, only 3% of the North American population, who were Americans at the time, actually decided to stand up and fight against the redcoats. And that is what it means to be an American. That if you are a small, incredibly committed minority, you can topple the most powerful regimes the world has ever known, and you can create the most powerful force for good that has ever happened since the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. America is special, but it's not passed down in our bloodstream. It has to be fought for generation by generation, and we are in the war for the next entire 100 years of the fate of the world by what happens the next 10 years here in America. Stand up and fight. Be a radical for freedom.
Amen.
Awesome. I think we have another question or two, if that's okay.
Sure. I got to be at the wedding at 2.
So, do you believe, like, as we are Christians, do you believe that God still has a hand in our elections? And on top of that, do you think as a country, for the past 4 years, do we deserve a good ruler, quote unquote ruler, or do we deserve an evil ruler because of what we have done in our country?
That's a great question. Well, listen, we are a nation under judgment, and I do believe that right now. I think we are heading for great hardship, whether Donald Trump wins this election or not. I think we have abandoned God as a nation, as a collective. We are, murdering and killing our children in the womb. We're sterilizing youth. I mean, we have destroyed very, very many things, but God forgives nations who repent, and we do have a chance and an opportunity for a real revival. That's what I'm praying for. There are Christians out there that hate and despise Donald Trump because he's far from a perfect guy. And to them I say, listen, I'm voting for Godzilla that he can help us hold back the hordes emerging from hell, because that is what the other side has for us. They have a living hell prepared for us. And that's the path that they're going to take us down. And that is not hyperbole. I mean, what we are facing is something that is massively dire. And it could be that we are, groaning under a horrific and horrible leader. Should Donald Trump win, I do think we have an opportunity to turn this thing around. We do have a period of time between when he does win and the election and the actual inauguration ceremony where I believe that there's going to be great violence in this country. I would be surprised if there is not. And I think it's
Perpetrated by the left. is
Oh,
what we're talking about.
100%. And I think I think he will be under tremendous danger because the forces of evil will not rest. And to answer your question, does God appoint our leaders and does he have a hand? Absolutely, both good and bad. We are going to be coming into some very interesting times, and I think we are actually blessed by that because in these interesting times, this is when some of the greatest people rise and some of the greatest of generations are formed.
And one thing, touching on what you just touched on the end, remember that there is a spiritual battle going on. The devil does have dominion in the principalities of the air are very, very real. You read in the Bible, and when a messenger was trying to get from God to some of his people, he said, "I'm sorry that it took me so long to get here. I was held up by the prince of Persia," which is a very powerful demon. And so there's actual combat going on, I think, through prayer, through words of our testimony, and through just being vigilant Christians who operate within the spiritual realm. I think we can help assist the angels and those of us who are trying to get Donald Trump elected. Another thing about that, even though this is a very dire and dark time, remember that we will be rewarded in heaven based on the faith that we exhibit here on earth. And remember, faith is believing in something that is still yet to be seen. And so when you get to heaven, you will no longer have the opportunity to exercise faith because seeing God and knowing that all of this is 1,000,000% real is just like gravity. If I drop this napkin, I know gravity exists. But when you get to heaven, you will not have the opportunity to exercise faith. And so just like I was talking about earlier, we should be thankful that we live in such dark times because God is giving us an opportunity to just show how much we love him. I mean, we're like living through the times of Job. He's probably bragging in heaven saying, "Look what my people can go through," and they still won't back down. I mean, it's truly incredible. Ma'am?
Thanks. Is this on? Okay. Excuse me. So I'm actually Canadian, so it doesn't really apply to me, but
Do we have a slur?
We
for
still love you.
Canadians?
I'm here legally, I promise. But I think there's a lot of Christians out there who, and I was actually raised this way, who believe, the conservative ones. The ones who aren't conservative aren't really Christians, in my opinion. But because of the scripture in First Corinthians, maybe second, that says we are heavenly ambassadors. We are not citizens of this world. Many Christians, unfortunately, the ones who would vote Republican won't be voting because they think that scripture means, oh, I'm not a citizen of the United States. I have no reason to vote. How would you refute that?
I'd tell them to go to Canada. It's already tyrannical government there.
It doesn't really matter if you vote in Canada because
That's
they
right.
don't care about your vote anyway.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, we touched on it a little bit. I mean, we do have a responsibility to engage, and for the passages that they use for that, we can show dozens where we are to be occupying until he comes, and where we are to be participants here, where we're to be
Look out for the welfare of your nation is a biblical tenet.
Amen. Yeah, over and over again, it reinforces the idea that we participate in the ecclesia or the public square, the town square. And for those people that believe that they shouldn't, they are going to, if you are not interested in politics is going to be interested in you.
Yes.
And eventually it's coming your way.
Yeah, and I know a lot of Christians who they sit back and they're just saying, well, you know what, we shouldn't fight against those who are appointed above us because God obviously appointed them, and that's the reason they do this. I think it's mainly in Romans that's talked about. What are the first three words to the preamble of our Constitution? We the people. We are the power in this country.
Yeah, we are Caesar here.
We are Caesar here. It is time for us to act like it. We are called to look out for the welfare of our nation. And also, if you want to look at it through a purely Christian viewpoint, the entire purpose of the United States of America is to have freedom of religion. And I genuinely believe that in a fair and open debate, Christianity will win out against any other religion. I am happy to go toe-to-toe with people who believe in any other religion. I specifically love talking to Muslims about it because they're really easy to convert over to Christianity. One, they already believe that Christ was a prophet, so they already think he's pretty powerful within the spiritual realm. But then you say, what if I told you he wasn't just a prophet, but he was the Son of God? And then you can bring them into the fold. And another reason that we should be involved in politics is because America is the greatest source of sending out missionaries into the world in the history of the world. That is what we do. I mean, we are a launching pad. America is not some kind of cruise ship. We are a aircraft carrier that sends out spiritual ambassadors to every corner of the world. And we are lifted up as a shining city on a hill, although our light's being diminished currently, of showing, hey, if you are a country that fears the Lord and follows his laws, look how prosperous and powerful you can be. And, you know, even if Donald Trump does not win this election, which I think he will, but also I do believe we will win on November 5th, but I think between November 5th and January 20th, we are in for the fight of our lives. Whether it's going to be rioting, people trying to be violent, people trying to do something crazy, assassination attempts, but also if you look at what the left is doing in their campaigns, they are hiring a ridiculous amount of lawyers right now. And that's not for them to go contest the ballots. We don't cheat in elections. That is for them to be able to try and bring lawsuit after lawsuit. You look at what's going to happen on December 16th when the state houses are going to be selecting their electors to go perform in the Electoral College. On December 18th, they'll have another opportunity. On January 6th, they'll have another opportunity. They have 4 opportunities to try and get this held up through lawfare. And then what if they just declare some kind of ridiculous emergency? Oh, well, an alien invasion happened. We got to cancel the election. We have to be very vigilant. And I think it's our duty as Christians to be in prayer, constantly praying for the welfare of our nation. And that also involves getting involved in. I think that it's very clear, especially in the Old Testament, that God wants you involved in the welfare of your nation.
Amen.
Any other questions from audience? Anything else?
I think we got time for one more.
All right, last one.
Oh, let's do 2 more. This guy had his hand up as well.
All right.
So there's been a lot of conversation about free speech in the Republican Party, and we talked a little bit about anti-Semitism as well. What are your thoughts about these laws, these free speech laws that will specifically ban anti-Semitic speech?
So speech, even what you hate, is protected and should be protected. I think that those laws and ideas are egregious. I think that sets it up to be unevenly applied against folks too. There is not a law on the books that they won't use for their own purposes. And an evil government needs to be restrained by having more power in the hands of the people rather than less. So don't be taken in by a lot of the games that even our side will play, because our side is so much a controlled opposition too that they will be manipulated into passing things that will ultimately, like the Patriot Act and other things that will ultimately be used against us.
I wish we had Ron Paul. Goodness. But I will tell you, especially pertaining to that law specifically, I mean, when they use examples like saying, oh, well, you know, the Pharisees were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ, and they say that that's an example of something that should be illegal to say, you know, that's a foreign government having far too much influence in our elections, whether I support that country or not. I don't want any other country having that much influence inside of our political sphere. And obviously, I believe that Israel has a right to defend itself. You know, I think they're a great ally and so on. But getting involved to try and tell Americans what we can and cannot say, that is the most heinous of acts. I want you to be able to say things that infuriate me, because I'm going to say some things that infuriate you. And, you know, I think that should be protected inside of our country. Anyways, last question, sir.
Thank you. There's been some recent
Man, you have a voice made for radio. That is sick.
in a world. There's been some recent wins on sort of the fight against diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, John Deere and those kind of things. But as I understand it, these offices and the bureaucracy behind them is deeply entrenched in the military and various state governments. Any recommendations or thoughts or ideas on how to not? I'm fearful that we would just use these little wins and it kind of gets quiet, and then ESG and DEI continue to breed.
So ESG needs to be destroyed. I mean,
100%.
That's economic and anyways, it's governance and trying to force companies to be able to do what they want so that they can have higher stock prices. But I will tell you, the big problem we have in Washington is the greatest union to ever exist is within the bureaucrats. Because these people just cannot be fired. And even if we get one of them in trouble, like, oh, look, this person broke the law, he's doing this, they're not going to be fired out of the government. They're just going to be quietly transferred to another department. They say, oh, well, he's no longer working in that position. But he wasn't fired out of the government, he or she. It's virtually impossible to be able to single out particular bureaucrats and say, hey, you're going to be fired. Because then they say, oh, that's political persecution, yada, yada, yada. This is something that I believe we should do. The incubator for this thought came from Vivek Ramaswamy, who, in the beginning, I really kind of thought, I was like, do I trust Vivek? But man, gosh, that guy is good. I love some of the stuff he says, but he had a great point. And I believe it would make the country a pretty tumultuous place. It would be difficult in some areas for probably a year or two, but we need massive layoffs within the federal government. We need massive layoffs to try and reform the way that all these things work. And also, not that I ever want to draw. I mean, we were talking about immigration earlier and taking the best of other cultures and bringing it here. Like, I believe in the brain drain. I believe in all these things, bringing the best of other stuff. Look what they're doing in Argentina. I love that guy. He just went and said, we're getting rid of 13 of our entire departments because they're useless and they're just draining our country. And so that's something that I really believe in. And I think that would help with destroying this DEI movement that's going on in our country.
Yeah, I mean, DEI, it's a Marxist influenced movement, and yes, we are having some victories here in some of our big corporations. Microsoft got rid of their DEI department. Others are following suit. We've put some appropriate political pressure on them as a conservative movement. You mentioned John Deere or Tractor Supply Company or some of those that have said, whoa, okay, yeah, we're removing it, we're getting rid of it, because they pissed off the vast majority of their own customers. And so, actual boycotts and noise does work. The left employs it so vigorously, and we do not up until recently here. And it has a great effect. So we need to keep that pressure up. Vivek and I'm very optimistic about Elon Musk's participating in our government. He has been asked, by Trump to participate in helping to reduce the size of it. We have Robert Kennedy Jr. I'm excited about him and the idea of make America healthy again.
Gosh, my mom's so excited about him. But scares me. I'm not going to let them ever be alone.
Tulsi Gabbard. All of a sudden, we're having all of these strange bedfellows uniting together because these folks are realizing that we do not want to be subject to the communist takeover of this country. And so there are some great reasons to be optimistic, and I am about what could happen.
Yeah. Well, anyways, guys, in closing, I really appreciate everybody coming out. I appreciate those of you who are carrying, because remember, we got to radicalize to normalize. I really appreciate the Old State Saloon. This place is awesome. I love it. I'm looking at a sign right now that says heterosexual awesomeness, and I want that shirt. That's really awesome. But I will tell you guys, I appreciate everybody coming out. It has been a pleasure getting to spend our morning with you. Bryce has his daughter getting married this afternoon, which we're all very excited about. We need more good Republican marriages out there and conservatives. But remember, this is a time in our lives when we have to get uncomfortable. This is a time in a period in our history where we have to be willing to stand up and fight for our country. And you know what? This is a time in our country that we were designed to be put here. We need to be able to be willing to put our incredible gifts that were given to us by God, to be able to fight for the rights that were given to us by God. Because I will tell you, the Magna Carta was an attempt to give people rights back 400, 500 years ago. Since then, until the American Revolution, nobody thought that was possible. If America falls, I promise there are no aid ships coming to our aid. If communism takes over here, it will take over everywhere.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, there is no fallback spot in America. Either we win this war right now, in the ballot box and within the zeitgeist and within being able to fight in the public square, or our lives are going to get very, very dark. And so let me tell you, it is a time for you to get involved. Go out, register people to vote. When in all my elections, I always try and do it as the Bible did it. I would send my volunteers out 2 by 2 to different houses for people who said, oh, hey, I'm voting for Donald Trump and I'm voting for you. We would send them out 2 by 2. So in case somebody was like, oh, I really wanted to go vote today, but I had to change the oil in my car because we have a road trip coming up, one person say, hey, I'll drive you in my car. This guy right here, he's going to change your oil. We got you. You need this woman to watch your kids. We got it. You're mowing your lawn. This guy will mow your lawn. I will drive you to the ballot box right now. I mean, I'm telling you, get very inventive with this. The Democrats are really, really good at being able to have all of their voters in one place, and they just need to send buses to pick them up and then send them where they need to go. We have to go collect our voters from everywhere. So be willing to have those conversations. And I mean, you might sound annoying, but get on the phone and say, hey, Darlene, have you voted yet? Well, if you haven't voted yet, you're not coming to book club. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, it's just, and make it fun. Tell your friends that you're going to go out and vote and just have a good time, and then you'll all go out to lunch afterwards. This is a time for us to get involved, because if we're not involved, we're going to lose our country. And when you watch the way that your children and grandchildren are raised in the world they lived in, you will be ashamed of yourself. Let us not hold our heads down in shame. Let us be remembered as a generation that saved the greatest nation in the history of the world.
Amen. Well, hey, you got something else? Okay, well then I'll just close this out the way I do on my show, which thank you, sir, for coming and hanging out with me.
Always. I'm
so happy to have you out for the wedding. This is awesome. It's been a treat. You're going to have to do it more than once. And, the way I close my show is normally by just saying, hey, to God be the glory. But I would love it if you prayed for our nation.
I would be honored. Dear Father God, those of us in this room come to you right now. Those of us who are watching online come to you right now. And we ask for the courage and the boldness. You know, you have a verse in the Bible, and it's talking about a muscular man with tan skin who made a lion retreat and went into a hole with him, a cave on a snowy day, and slayed him with his bare hands. Now, God, there's not many people mentioned in the Bible, so to be able to be mentioned as that, as your story, God, I hope that in the annals of history in heaven, that those of us who are born in this generation, in this time in America, are remembered as dragon slayers, because what an honor it is, Father, for us to be alive in a time when there are actual leviathans to be slayed. Father, I pray that you give us the shrewdness of snakes and the innocence of doves, so that we can go out and fight this battle as you would, Father, with tactics, with strategy, with an open mind, with love for our neighbors. That's why we're doing this, Father, so that you can get all of the glory. God, I believe that in so many times all throughout history and all throughout the Bible, you stack the odds against those who are faithful to you, so that whenever they achieve the victory that was promised to them, when David said that surely I'll see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, that whenever he did see the goodness of the Lord, it was so obvious that it was you who achieved that victory, because the odds are stacked against us. But God, I pray that you give us the courage to be able to fly on with wings like eagles, because God, we will not grow weary of this fight, because we know that you sent us here for it. God, remind us that everywhere, as you said in Genesis, that we have dominion of this earth, that everywhere our foot falls and treads, that we already own that territory, that we have the authority based in your name and the Son of your name, Jesus Christ, to be able to go into a place to cast the demons out and to do combat with our words, with our actions, and with our prayers, to be able to fight for you and fight for the goodness of our country and for our fellow man. God, I thank you for your son's death on the cross that is giving us all the ability to speak to you anywhere we are. We don't have to go to some holy place. We don't have to have some mediator. But God, we can come to you directly and just talk to you about our day or ask you what we need. But God, right now, what we need in this nation is a resurgence of common sense and a resurgence of a backbone. God, may we all have backbones that are reinforced with titanium so that we can stand against the evils of this day. We pray all these things in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Where can we follow you, sir?
My name's Madison Cawthorn. That's what all my things are. Just Madison Cawthorn. I love the country. If you love the country, that's enough for me.
Yeah, well, you can follow me. My show's to be found everywhere that you listen to podcasts, or on Rumble, The Bryce Eddy Show. You can see me get after it and absorb brain damage on Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, now called X, Bryce Eddy 1, or on my Instagram, which is Super Bryce Eddy.
Super Bryce Eddy.
And the Bryce Eddy Show, if you want to go and sign on to our email list and find out about things that we're doing, it is bryceeddy.com. To God be the glory, and we are out.
Thanks.
Hey, Jonathan.